We use clinical evidence from research to determine which medical approaches will work best to treat illnesses like cancer. Like Rose's example of Herceptin, every new cancer therapy available today is there because of patients who volunteered to participate in a clinical trial. So clinical trials can provide patients access to potentially successful therapies before they have gained FDA approval. Of course, there is also a risk that the participant will not have benefits. Next slide. So there are different types of research that are being conducted in the community, and I wanted to share this with you because I don't want this to just be about new drug therapies, but there are also preventative research, which is designed to help prevent illness. There's also screening and diagnostic research, which helps to identify new ways to identify that disease or diagnose a disease. It includes things like understanding, for example, biomarkers in cancer. That's one example. And then, of course, there's treatment or interventional research, which is used to learn new ways to treat disease or manage a symptom of a disease. That's through either a drug or a device. Surgery is another example. And then lastly, there's quality of life research, which helps us learn, as it implies, ways to improve a person's quality of life. This type of research is often included in treatment research as well. So particularly with cancer patients, there's a focus on ensuring that a new treatment is not only effective, but that will not cause a worsening quality of life for those patients. Next slide. So I wanted to share with you some of the efforts that go on in clinical research that are not always well known, but important in keeping patients safe. So the act of bringing a drug to market is a long process, which begins in what we call preclinical testing. Preclinical research is everything that goes on in a lab before a drug is ever tested on a human being. This is extensive work done in discovery, where scientists will investigate disease and will include cellular and animal research. It also includes what we call toxicology studies, and that is to determine if a drug can cause harm to the body. And then there are also pharmacokinetic studies, which is the study of how the body will metabolize the drug. And if the drug is proven safe, then the FDA reviews that research, and it also has to agree that it is safe before any testing can start in human beings. So when a drug developer wants to begin human research, they have to apply to the FDA for an IND, or investigational new drug application. This is a process where all the preclinical data is shared, including the aforementioned toxicology and pharmacokinetic data. They'll have to share things like how the drug is going to be manufactured safely and what is their overall plan for that research. It is all reviewed, and if the evidence supports, again, safety, the FDA can approve that they begin research in humans. And then once human research begins, there are what we call IRBs, or institutional review boards, that review the research plan for safety at the beginning and also throughout the research process. IRBs are required by federal regulations to provide oversight to the research. And the communication to IRBs come not only from the drug developer, but also by the physicians and research staff that take care of the patients directly. So one example is if a patient has an unexpected adverse reaction or side effect, this gets reported to those IRBs by the individuals caring for that patient. And then another important safety provision are what we call data and safety monitoring boards. And these are independent experts. Their job is to monitor safety, and in my experience, this happens at sort of pre-planned time points where research is paused and reviewed before additional patients can participate.
Katie, I want to just mention something for all the advocates in the audience. That the IRBs, you'll notice that the panels are also made up of patient advocates, and these are highly skilled, trained advocates who go through scientific training. But most importantly, what they do is they provide the patient input, because the scientist might have a different opinion of something that they think is valuable or is not going to hurt the patient, but the patient representative will be there to speak on behalf. So the IRBs are, I mean, all of these are really incredible, but that's something that should put people's mind at ease as well if they're choosing to participate in a trial, is the patient is literally at the table.
You're right.
Okay.
That is absolutely correct. Thank you. All right, next slide. So in each phase of the drug development process, each step along the way is considered separate. And in each phase, the results are reviewed and determined safe and effective before research progresses to the next phase. So in a phase 1, if we're starting on the left side of the slide, a phase 1 trial precisely investigates how the human body is absorbing and excreting the drug. And then this is used to determine what dose can be used for later research. They're also collecting information about side effects that also, will help further determine patient safety and dosing. And then a trial can move on to phase 2 research, which is testing what we call the efficacy of the drug. So in other words, what is the clinical effect on the illness being studied? Did it improve? Ultimately, that's what we hope for. And then in addition, we're collecting data on side effects and other labs and things throughout the course of that. Then at the conclusion of a phase 2 trial, we go to phase 3. And phase 3 is the final phase before a drug reaches FDA for a requested approval. There are a larger number of patients that are included in that phase 3 trial. And that is done in order to prove a statistical outcome. So the likeliness that the outcome of that trial will be trusted and consistent if that drug is approved and given to many, many people after FDA approval. So then the drug goes to the FDA for what we call a new drug application. The FDA will review all the prior research, everything that's happened before even going back to preclinical, and that process of their review can take up to a year. They assess these data before making a decision on how to allow the drug company to market their drug. Also, during that time, the FDA will pay a visit to locations where research was conducted, and part of that, not every location, but select numbers of locations will be chosen, and the FDA will come out, review records of patients, and the purpose of that is to validate that the information shared with the FDA by the drug company is true and accurate. So go on to the next slide, please. So as Rose kind of alluded to, we know that most cancer patients will receive their treatment and care in a community setting, as opposed to an academic center. And drug developers know this too. They will seek out our practices to conduct their research. They assess our ability to identify patients and manage their trials with the highest level of quality. And then they work with us to conduct the clinical research. Community oncology practice who want to participate in clinical research or become what we call a research site have to make a commitment to this effort. This would require that practice to ensure that they have the space, equipment, doctors, staff, and training to conduct research. For example, All of us who work in clinical research must have a regular training on federal regulations which govern how clinical research is conducted in the United States, and how we are required by federal regulations to protect patients' rights. So the sponsors are the drug developers who come out and look for oncology practices to conduct their research. They ultimately make the decision on where the study will be placed. The numbers of locations that participate is not unlimited, I will say. So the same trial will be put in a limited number of locations. Usually that is dependent on the size of the trial. If they're looking for a very large number of patients, like a phase 3 trial, it'll be available in more practices than a phase 1 or a phase 2 trial would be. And although there are hundreds of trials that are ongoing right now, the site selection process by these sponsors is competitive. So we all want the best trials for our patients, or what we believe to be the best trials for our patients. Next slide. So a frequent and very important question is, who pays for my care while I'm on a clinical trial? And I wanted to share a little information about this topic because it can definitely be a source of confusion. And it's important to note that cancer research is not a mechanism to have your bills paid. It can sometimes lessen associated costs, for example, when a drug is provided at no cost to the patient, but there are still routine cancer care costs that are not paid for by the study. So on the left side, routine cancer care costs are those things that a patient would already require, like doctor's visits, CT scans, and standard treatment, which is often a part of a clinical trial. And then research costs are the things that are paid for by the research sponsors. And those are the things that a patient would not have likely had in a routine care, like the investigational drug, for example, is provided at no charge. There may also be tests or labs that are being done solely for research reasons, and those are paid for also by the study. I also want to make a note that there are provisions that are included in the Affordable Care Act, or the ACA, which help protect patients by requiring that private insurers cover routine costs associated with trials. So this means they can't deny your coverage just because a patient decided that they wanted to participate in a clinical trial.
Katie, this just triggered a patient memory for me, and I also want to share this with the audience, and it's actually a real positive. So you're going to get the standard of care, but as a clinical trial participant, I mean, I was even at the doctor's office more, and I felt like an added level of care. So that's another positive. I mean, they were monitoring everything all the time. And when you're a cancer patient, you know, anyone who knows when your cancer treatment ends, you're happy that your cancer treatment is going to end, but then a little bit of paranoia sets in because you're so used to being seen all the time. And with a clinical trial, you know, you're getting seen by your doctors and nurses even more.
That's true. There's an additional team that works with the clinical trial patients. So in my experience, that usually means an additional oncology nurse, and additional lab support staff. All are looking very closely at you and recording, you know, every side effect and just really looking carefully at those patients. So it is definitely another benefit. Okay, next slide. So again, Rose had kind of touched on this a little bit. Participating in a trial is a very personal choice that a patient makes. It is a personal choice that I do hope that can become more available to more patients, but there are definitely barriers in this process that we have to overcome. We know that less than 5% of adult cancer patients will participate in a clinical trial, but 70% say that they would like to participate, and that's a big difference. And so there are barriers, and these barriers are what we call structural, which means, does your cancer center offer trials? And if not, can you travel to a physical location that will have it for you. There are also what we call clinical barriers, and that includes things like, does a patient have clinical characteristics to participate? We call this eligibility criteria. It's predefined patient profile that can be included in that trial. So for example, a study may only be enrolling patients with a specific stage of cancer or who have been previously treated with a very specific treatment. And if that was not your stage or your treatment plan prior, then you won't meet that criteria and you can't participate. There are also what we call attitudinal barriers, and these are personal decisions. So personal decisions that patients will make to participate or not to participate. There doesn't need to be a reason. A person can just choose not to join. And attitudinal barriers also includes if a physician chooses not to offer that trial to his or her patient. So this graph on the left here shows the results of one study of the barriers between an academic and community centers. And there honestly wasn't much of a difference. But you can see by this graph that the structural barriers really appear to be the greatest for us to overcome. And so we really have to do, I think, a better job of getting these trials to the community and to the places where these patients can choose to participate. So I have my last slide. Next slide. So the last thing I want to do is share with you how you can find a clinical trial. So first, patients have to talk to their doctors and other members of their healthcare team. So you can reach out to us. We want to help you find the trial if that is what your desire is to do. We can also do the work of researching it for you, looking for it, using websites, contacting our colleagues in other institutions to help try and find the right trial for you. There's also a database of private and publicly funded clinical trials at clinicaltrials.gov, which is supported by the National Institutes of Health. In this website, you can enter different search criteria to narrow down your options. And it will produce for you a nice list of all the different trials that are open, not just here in the US, but actually internationally as well. And then you can also connect with different advocacy groups which are specific to a type of cancer. So for example, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society has great insight into what trials are being conducted for that type of cancer. And the same is true for other different advocacy groups. And then before I turn this back to Rose, I want to just share a few of my favorite resources on the internet. These are very reliable websites. They have trustworthy information that can answer your questions about research. So I turn to these often, and I hope that you will too. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Rose.
Really great information, great slides. And also, thank you for sharing that you, as a vice president, you will still use these websites as a reference. So all of us as students can also go to these websites. And I'm familiar with all of them. They're all terrific. One that I think the advocates, or anyone actually, will find really interesting is the Fda.gov. And Katie, you had a slide where it was the road to drug approval, where you had the 4 phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And I loved your visual how phase 1, and I'm looking at my hard copy because I love having hard copies of everything. You know, phase 1 is a really small group, then phase 2, the size of the group increases. But what's really interesting, and I'm just working off memory here, but Fda.gov, when you look at the phases of the trials, they show you how the number of drugs that make it to the next stage. So the great thing about clinical trials is there's a lot of, some of the trials just don't make it to the next phase. So by the time it's making it to the patient population, we can all feel very confident that we're going to get something that has gone through many, many layers. And like Katie described, the IRBs, the institutional review boards, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And then Katie, you also mentioned COVID. I know, and you mentioned that participating in a trial is very personal. Getting the COVID vaccine is very personal, and I know that I've had, friends and family members that were reluctant, and they said, "Rose, what really bothers me about the vaccine is how could they make a drug so quickly?" And Katie, you mentioned that part of the trial process is learning how drugs can be used for other indications. And I think that's really important. So you've shared really great information with us today. Thank you so much, Katie, for sharing your knowledge with us today. And we will go on to the next slide, and I get to tell you all about our next amazing guest. So I came across this amazing physician, Dr. Janega, who's known as the Onc Doc on social media. And of course, on these advocacy chats, we go really deep on some topics. We've brought you very policy heavy topics. We've brought you some clinical related topics, and now we're going to talk to you about social media, because as advocates, we want to get our word out there. We want to amplify what we learn. So I came across this amazing physician who works at a cancer center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but he has an incredible following on social media. He is using all different types of social media to bring cancer education to his patients. And you can even check him out on TikTok. He uses even dancing, and I probably did a really bad dance right now, an embarrassing mom dance, but please join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. And thank you for sharing your time with us today. And we will see you next month on Wednesday, June 9th at 12 p.m. And thank you again to our audience and to Katie and to our team, Drew behind the scenes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.